Good afternoon, Girl Scout Network. I'm Ava Castleton, Manager of Alum Events at Girl Scouts of the USA, and I'm so excited to present to you Girl Scout Network's Campfire Chat, How Troop 6000 Inspired the World. A panel discussion with Nikita Stewart, author of the book, Meridith Mascara, CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater New York, and Giselle Burgess, the inspiration behind Troop 6000 and the current Troop 6000 program manager, moderated by Nikole Hannah-Jones, journalist at the New York Times Magazine. We're looking forward to getting started with this event for alums and adult supporters shortly. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Nikole Hannah-Jones, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine, MacArthur Fellow, and creator of the 1619 Project. Nicole will be leading our discussion about the inception of Troop 6000, finding community despite challenging conditions, and experiencing joy and success in the face of hardship, all themes in Nikita's book. We will be sharing your questions for our panelists, so please type them in the question box. Don't forget to tag social posts with #CampfireChats and @Girl Scouts. Throughout the broadcast, you'll have the opportunity to support Girl Scouts and purchase the book if you've not done so already. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for joining us. Welcome.
Hey, everyone. So I'm very excited to be here tonight with everyone and to talk about Nikita's excellent book. I remember the entire time when she was working on it and writing on it. I'm just very, very proud of her. It is not an easy thing to write a book. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So just really excited to have this talk and to virtually meet Giselle and Meridith as well, whom I learned so much about and really came to admire when I was reading the book. So let's begin with you, Nikita. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you came to this story. So you're a reporter, part of your beat is covering social service agencies and homelessness. How did you first hear about Troop 6000 and what drew you to this story?
I first heard about Troop 6000 through an email from a council aide to council member Jimmy Van Bramer, who represents the district where the Sleep Inn, which was a hotel that had been turned into a shelter, was located. And that council aide told me about this extraordinary troop that had started. It had just gotten off the ground, and he said, "Oh, you've got to meet Gizelle Burgess, the mother who is behind the troop." And so it took me a minute to track her down. She was busy. And I remember, my first phone call with her. What I didn't realize until much later was that I had actually kind of met Giselle in passing 2 years earlier when she was not homeless. And at the time, we were in a different shelter where she was leading Girl Scouts in serving women who were experiencing homelessness. And, it really hit home for me that, I would write it all the time, right? You too can be homeless, but in this case, it actually happened to Giselle. And so to tell her journey, I'm so glad she agreed to allow me in her life. And, she created a beautiful thing, and I hope I captured it in the book.
So Giselle, what was that first conversation like with Nikita when she came and said that she wanted to tell this story?
Of course, I was excited that someone even wanted to hear our story. So it was exciting. At the same time, I was a little skeptical about it. Like, I don't know Nikita. I don't know how much I want to give her, how much information. This is exciting. But after some time had went by, I really got nervous. She was always writing in the book. I'm like, what is she writing down in that notebook? Oh my God, we have to be careful what we're saying, what we're doing, what is happening. But then getting to know Nikita and really seeing how genuine she was and how amazing she is, and just the way that her work is, how she cares about her work as well, really gave me that comfort. And I was like, okay, I opened up a little bit. So I was really excited to see what would come from it.
So for those who haven't read the book yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you and your family came to be in the homeless shelter, and then how you came to start Troop 6000?
Sure. So back in 2016, my children and I lost our home because our landlord had sold it to make way for some condos that were being built next door. And so trying to find an apartment in New York City with 5 children is impossible. Either I couldn't afford it, or the landlords didn't want to give it to me because I had too many kids. So it became a really big issue. I tried staying with my mom, but again, my mom has my siblings and I have a very small apartment. It was really uncomfortable and kind of needed our own space. And someone had told me about PATH, which is the intake location for families to go to when they're looking for shelter. So we packed up all of our belongings. We went into PATH. The first time around was not as successful. We ended up in a shelter really far from home. I didn't have any of my resources. I didn't feel safe. I wasn't comfortable with it. The experience in its own is just nerve-wracking to begin with, and then to do it with children on top of that makes it even worse. You're trying to portray this strong and everything's fine. You're not afraid, and this fearless person for your children, but at the same time you're in the same position as them. Something new, something scary. So we ended up leaving that shelter that we initially went to. We were there for like a day, and then trying to stay at my family's house again, but ended up back at PATH to try this one more time. And this time I was successful enough to be able to be placed close to home. So I was placed in Queens, in my hometown area. So I knew where I was, who was there. And just once we got there, that just feeling of loneliness, like there was no sense of community, there was no happiness, there was no joy. And there's so many rules, and of course the rules are there for our protection and our safety, but we also have to be mindful that if we're there with children, we have to try and make the best out of the situation that we can, and doing that was impossible there. So I was working for Girl Scouts at the time, and in that area, and my job was to start new Girl Scouting troops at different locations, whether it be faith-based locations or schools. And so I went back and asked Meridith, and I was like, hey, do you think it'd be okay for me to start a troop here at the shelter? And she's like, absolutely, why not? Why wouldn't you be able to do that? So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll try this out. I went back to my boss at the time when I was working for the Queens department, and she's like, all right, well, we can do a series there. Tell us what you need. Let's get it started. And so we started this series. I put up a couple of flyers to see if we can get the girls to come down. And out of all the girls that were there, we only had 7 girls, which out of those 7, 3 of them were my own daughters. So I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know how this is going to work out, but it's a start. And so we had went away for a Girl Scouting trip to DC, and we had set up a phone call. Me and Meridith had to pretend like we were in different areas, because at the time I was supposed to be in place, but it was for a good cause. So we got on the phone, and it was just a phone call full of women. It was me, Meridith, Kathy from DHS, Department of Homeless Services, Heidi, who at the time was working for Department of Homeless Services and now is serving as our program director, and a few other women who were on the call from the shelter that I was at. And we had this discussion of just like, this is what we're trying to do. This is why it's important for us to do this. We hope that we can get your support on this. And of course, everyone on the phone was excited. Like, yes, we have to do this. Let's do it. We're happy for this. Of course, we had to also make sure that there's rules that stay in place during this time here. And there was a lot of different scenarios that were thrown at us that we had to make sure that we avoided, which, sometimes you can't avoid everything. We did try our best, but we got to go ahead. And then so going back to the shelter now, I'm like, okay, we got to go ahead and do this. I need to get more girls. I need to get leaders, and trying to recruit them, putting posters everywhere possible, elevators, every floor of the hotel rooms of the hotel, and just speaking to people. And so when we were trying to train our leaders, unfortunately, no one came. No one showed up. I had all this food and nobody came. But I remembered I had a conversation with Corey the night before. And so I called her and I'm like, hey, where are you? I'm downstairs. Come down and get trained. So of course she came down, she got trained, we had our leader, and then recruiting girls. We still kept trying. The girls that came to the first meeting were actually my own spokesperson. They were out there telling girls like, hey, we got badges and we got book bags and we had so much fun. And so other girls started to ask their parents, like, can we join? We want to join too. And so from 17, from 7 went to 17. Nikita came in and did her amazing story that was on the front page. And it took off. It like skyrocketed. I mean, at one point we had 32 girls or 33 girls that were in that shelter meeting in one small breakfast area.
I mean, I'm really curious, you know, one of the things I think Nikita's book does so well is it just shows, on top of just the normal, you know, the stress of being without housing and having to figure all of that out, that the system is so incredibly challenging and not easy to navigate whatsoever. Doesn't really seem like much of a advocacy program for people who need housing. So why on earth, on top of like everything that you were trying to do to secure housing, did you think it was a good idea to start a Girl Scout troop on top of that?
I mean, I've always been one to take on more than I can chew at the same time, and it's okay. I find it exciting and challenging, but at the same time, you know, it is a lot. You know, the system is in place to help us. Unfortunately, there are flaws in that system that need to be fixed, and so I'm already stressed out enough. I can only imagine how my children are at the time, and so being in a situation like this, you know, my kids had went to school their first day at their new school, and hearing them say like, Mom, you know, I didn't want to tell anybody where I lived at, you know, or I felt embarrassed about it, I didn't want to talk about it, and knowing that broke my heart. You know, it's like, I don't want them, we're already in a messed up position to begin with, and so I don't want it to make it any worse for you. And so I firsthand can speak on the benefits of Girl Scouting. You know, before I became homeless, Girl Scouting did something for me personally, as a single mom, not having that confidence and not knowing where I was going to be with my kids or how I was going to manage to raise 5 children alone, and becoming a leader and being tricked into becoming a leader really did save my life in a way. And it built that courage in me and that wanting to do more and wanting something better for not just myself, but for everyone. And so seeing how it also affected my kids and how it benefited them, and they just grew to be such courageous girls, and just watching them so loving and so selfless, I'm like, the girls here could really use that, you know, and not even just the girls, the parents can use that too. It's important to build that community, and it's important to feel that sense of belonging and to having someone to be able to speak to that may understand what you're going through. And so that was really important for me to give that outlet to not just my kids and myself, but to other families that were there, to have that way to communicate with other people and be able to relate without feeling any judgment and just feeling pure love and support.
So Nikita, when did you did the story in the New York Times and it, you know, blew up. It was everywhere. Everyone was really drawn to this story. But when did you realize that this story needed to be more than a newspaper story?
The day it ran. I was inundated with emails, just people wanting to know more, people wanting to help. And I just decided, you know, I always thought I would write a book, but I thought I would write a book about political corruption because I had covered politics most of my career. And I thought about it and I was like, I should write this book. I should follow them. People need to understand homelessness, and that it affects families with children, mostly in New York City. And so I went to Giselle and I said, well, you would be the main person I follow. Would you be up for this? And I explained to her, there's no, yet, like, I can't give you anything. All I can do is promise to share your story in the most sensitive, accurate way that I possibly can. And I explained to her that I was probably going to be in her life for at least a year. And she said, absolutely. I was like, wow, she is just so, wow. I found out that that was all a lie. She really did not trust me. And it took like 2 months for her to really trust me. But you know, I'm just so glad that she agreed. And you know, the story kept changing too. There were people, the troop leaders. I didn't know who I would ultimately follow. I didn't know. You know, the girls. Some girls were moving. Some girls showed up. And so, but really it ended up focusing on what Karina, Giselle's daughter, she coined the OGs, which were the original Girl Scouts, not original gangsters. And so it was just, yeah, they're in my heart forever.
So there are more than 500,000 people in the United States who experience homelessness on any night. And we know that homelessness comes with a great deal of stigma in this country. And a lot of times, particularly with families, we don't even see it. And it's expressed in the book that your own children were really reticent for people to know, here they are helping other people and they themselves are experiencing homelessness. What were your calculations? I'm always fascinated when people agree to talk to us as journalists, because I would never allow journalists to follow me, but particularly at one of my lowest moments, to have someone tagging along, you're super stressed, you're not going to be this perfect person in every moment. No person would, but especially when you're going through something so devastating. So what was your calculation about whether you really should allow your family story to be told in the New York Times, one of the biggest circulation papers in the world, and then in a book?
I mean, just like you said, none of us are perfect, right? Even at our highest and at our lowest, we're all human. And I think it was really important for people to see that you can go through something so traumatic, and something that can really leave a hard impact on your life, but you're able to overcome that. And so what I want people to see from this story is I myself have not made perfect decisions my entire life. But I learned from all my mistakes. I've learned from things that didn't work out for me. And it's built me to be who I am today, to be, resilient, to always persevere. And I'm an optimistic person. So, I want people to see that and to try and adopt that in their lives themselves, and just keep reminding themselves, like, we're all going through our own challenging moments in life. What doesn't make us break us makes us, right? And at the same time, I want them to know that it's only a season. Whatever you're going through that may be hard on you at that moment, it's a season in life. It'll pass. And what you make from that is what's going to determine what your future is. So just keep on smiling and pushing, and know that there's always going to be something that's for you when it's meant for you. Even when you feel like you're at your lowest, it's just that moment, and just keep on pushing through.
So Meridith, when Giselle came to you and said, I want to start this troop in the shelter, what was your initial response?
Go for it. Go. I think when Giselle and I have had a relationship that whenever she comes to me and says, here's what I'm thinking, my initial reaction with her is always go for it. I've always had a huge amount of confidence in her, sometimes a lot more than she's ever had in herself, and have believed in her ambition of wanting to do something and wanting to achieve. And to me, this was something absolutely that I knew that she could do. What we had to figure out was this back end. We've always served girls who have been experiencing homelessness, as many Girl Scout councils across the United States do. But this model that we were proposing was very different, because it was about going into the shelters. And Girl Scouting is absolutely about equality. This is about equity. Girl Scouting is available to all girls, but there are communities that we have to understand we're not their priority. They are our priority. So we have to make our programs equitable and go into communities to make sure that those girls have all of the resources that any other girl can have across New York City. So this was that model. And the complexity of the New York City Department of Homelessness, it's the largest system, it's the most bureaucratic system. There's a lot of twists and turns, and because of the rules and regulations, program delivery is not allowed in these centers. So that was our number one thing, is to make sure we get there. We have to embed ourselves in there. And as Giselle was describing with that phone call when we were in DC, was we had one shot. We were given one shot to prove this model. And what we knew is that if we could prove it in one shelter, this is scalable. And this is absolutely the right thing to do for those girls at the sleep-in. But there are up to 8,000 girls between the ages of 5 and 18 at any time living in those shelters. So what we develop has to be able to be turnkey. We've got to make it scalable and fundable, and make sure that it's sustainable, because the last thing we want to do is create more instability in anyone's lives in these communities. So those were like the core facts that we had to have. And when we were very careful in establishing that first troop, because we knew that it was going to catch on and to spread. And what started out as one, we're now in 21 shelters across all 5 boroughs, right? Like the growth, and immediately we had a wait list of shelters, directors from different shelters calling and saying, when do we get this? When do we get this? And it was then when we had to establish that financial partnership also with the department, with DHS, to make sure that we were getting support, because this is an integral aspect to these the residents in these communities, that DHS can be offering and help support that financially. So it was no surprise. I think, you know, when it's the right thing to do, you just know, and you just have to trust your gut. There was never a hint that this wasn't the right thing to do. And we had a lot of no's, and we had a lot of doubt, and we had a lot of people saying this is too risky, and but we're Girl Scouts. And if there is a girl in New York City who can benefit and become a young leader and change some of the social constructs that we have, it'll happen through Girl Scouting, and we have to be there for her.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. So Nikita, you know, as someone who also writes a lot about people who live on the margins, I know that there's always this instinct to find the quote unquote perfect victim, that if we show a person as fully human, flaws, everything, that people will lose sympathy, that we have to present someone who is perfect so people will have sympathy. And you clearly refuse to do that. That's part of what makes your reporting so powerful, is you render people in their full humanity. So there are definitely in the book, there are moments where you're like, that decision wasn't so great. Or there was a part, Giselle, where when you found yourself particularly desperate, you used your own connections to try to help your family. And I think all of that is important, because that's what people do. Can you talk about, Nikita, like why in telling a story where you're trying to get people to see folks that they've written off, that they blame, that they try to marginalize as worthy of being treated with the same dignity as anyone else, why it was important for you still to tell this story, as flawed as people are, and with people showing their full humanity, that we all have our good moments and we have our bad.
You know, one of the things that Meridith kept talking about was equity and equality, and that also goes to mistakes. You know, when you have money and you make a mistake, you have, you know, you have somewhere to fall. And it could be the exact same mistake, the exact same decision that someone who has less money makes. And then, you know, there's judgment about that. And I have just always decided in my reporting that I reject that. I reject it. People are people. We all wish we had done something differently, but it should not determine your place in this world. It shouldn't determine your being able to rise or have a home for your family or feed your family. That shouldn't be the only setback, that one mistake. And you know, one of the things that I found with all of the families is, you know, all it takes is the car breaking down, or you know, you went to that for-profit college and now you have this loan that you're trying to pay. There, I could have had a chapter that just dealt with all of the different predatory lending, et cetera, that the families were subjected to. But I chose not to do that. I chose to pepper it throughout the book. And one of the things that I do, I believe in the book, and I do, and a lot of my reporting is, I write about a lot of sad things, and I write about, periods of time in people's lives when they are at their lowest, at their most vulnerable. But one of the things I talk about is how everyone, no matter what they're going through, laughs about something. And there's always that kind of shared joke, that shared, it just brings people together. Like, you might not be able to relate to living in a shelter, but you'll relate to, oh my gosh, well, that was funny. Oh yeah, that happened to me too. And so that's another reason, another way that I try to kind of, we want to call it leveling the playing field, if you will, or just trying to find that connection that people can see between themselves and others.
Yeah, I just really think that's so important because, and we've had conversations about this, how even I would find myself trying to find this flawless child when I'm writing about school segregation, because I feel like, oh, the only way I can get people to care about children who are struggling is they have to be perfect, and none of us are. And I think that is so critical, that we don't put forth the faith of who is deserving of help based on how perfect they are. We are all deserving of assistance when we need it. So I've always really admired that about your reporting. Now, I also know as a reporter, when you know that you're going to have to write things about people that are unflattering, and that can be very uncomfortable, because if you're a good reporter, no one is ever surprised by what you've written about them. You've had the conversation and they know. And I wonder, how did you explain this process to Giselle and the other families in the book? And were there moments in your reporting that were particularly fraught because you're like, I'm going to have to write this, and I'm going to have to tell them that I'm going to have to write this?
Yes, that can definitely be difficult. I had to have a lot of conversations with Giselle, like, okay, this is going to appear in the book. And, we talked it through. Even in my everyday stories, I do my best to, I go to the person and I let them know everything that is going to be in the article, so that there are no surprises. And, sometimes when someone hears it out loud, they're like, oh, ooh, that kind of hurt. And then I think, oh, well, can I say that a different way, that it says the same thing, but it doesn't, it's not as blunt and as hard. But there is a parent in the book who she reached out to me, and because everyone saw at least the passages that dealt with them before the book came out. And I asked her, I was like, oh, were there any mistakes or anything? She's like, no. She was like, I just wanted to tell you it was really hard to read, but like, I wouldn't change a thing. I really liked the way you wrote it. And to me, that's like the highest compliment, to, just be able to show a person, but them be like, you know what, that is how it is. And I like the way you put that. I can remember Meridith telling me a few things, of how, Meridith has an interesting home that I described. And she's like, you know what? I like the way you put that. That's exactly what it looks like around here. It's good. And so, I always, one of the other things too is, you know, working on this book and taking on this beat, my family sometimes lived check to check. And I always wanted to remember the times when we had the checks, and I kind of like always forgot about the times we didn't have them. And what was important to me is to write about people the way I would want to read about me or my family. And so I always have that in mind when I'm writing about people.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that in your reporting. And when I'm talking to younger journalists, I always say, if you would be too embarrassed to read this back to the person, you need to do a gut check about that, because you can write about things in ways that are very callous and hurtful, even if you're not meaning them to. But if there's any sense that you can't read this back, then there's a reason for that. And for so many people, not just vulnerable people, but particularly vulnerable people, there's one time that they will ever be in anybody's newspaper. And you don't want that one time to be an experience that they have found devastating, or where they felt that they were misled. And I really do think that's the power of your reporting. Gizelle, what was that experience like for you, reading those passages about yourself and your family for the first time?
It was hard. It definitely was hard. And the way that Nikita writes her stories, kind of like you can close your eyes and you're there in that moment. You can remember smells and sounds and things that are going on. So it was really difficult for me to relive it again, and then to say to myself, like, wow, Giselle, like, you really made some pretty rough decisions or some pretty brash decisions, didn't think it through. But at the same time, as I'm reading it too, I kept reminding myself, like, well, look at where you are now. Look at where you're at. Look at how much you've overcome. Look at what you've done. Look how much you've changed and grown. And so it's hard, but it's also, for me, it was, it was an opportunity for me to kind of take a step back and just look at myself and nod up and down, like, all right, you did pretty good for yourself for what you had, you know?
Yeah, I just want to tell you, I just think it's incredibly brave that you were willing to share this much of your life and those truths. And frankly, I think it is less helpful for someone in a similar circumstance to see someone who's not honest, because then you say, well, I'll never be able to get out of it because I can't make every perfect decision. So I think your bravery and honesty is what is probably most helpful for other families in the same circumstances you are. What do you think, Giselle, that people least understand about homelessness?
It's definitely the same thing that I thought going into the shelter. You know, first you think homelessness is the man outside with the cardboard sign asking for money. Then you think, oh, they might be homeless because of drugs, or because they don't know how to spend their money, or alcohol abuse, or whatever the case may be. But not realizing that it goes so much deeper than that. It's working families. It's people like you and I. Everyone's literally living at this moment in life one check away from being homeless. It's families who are trying to just make a better, a better living environment for their children. For example, if they're in a domestic violence situation, they need to get out. There's so many different levels of homelessness that I don't think people really understand. And it's people who do know how to budget their money and do know how to spend, but just hit a really rough patch in their life, and they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet without living check to check. That sometimes you're in that situation. So I want that to be something that's clear too, like not only to look down on people who are in this position or pity them or feel like they have some type of problem or issue, but and just be supportive. Just be supportive of these people. I really need for people to understand that that's the most important thing that someone in this situation can use as a support, and having resources that are there available to families that may be in need. But again, don't judge it. It's something that we've been out there trying to break. The stigma of homelessness is not easy, but watching my daughters do it inspires me to want to do it, and I hope it inspires others to do it.
Thank you for that. So Meridith, you and Giselle come from very different backgrounds and have very different lives in many ways, that you ended up becoming friends. Can you talk to me about your relationship and how that relationship became an essential part of bringing Troop 6000 into existence?
Yeah, our paths were definitely meant to cross, and they crossed while we were both. I'm also a mother of 5, and when she dropped her girls off to a Girl Scout meeting when I was a volunteer, still before I took a job at Girl Scouts, and there was an immediate sense of just trust, and we bonded very quickly, probably, over the mother thing of we had matched up each of our kids and like sent them off as friends, and then bringing her in and seeing welcoming her into the sisterhood. There's such a powerful thing when we think of Girl Scouts and we think of it being just for girls. And I argue that, and I question it, and I push that boundary, because it is just as much of an organization for women than it is for girls. And I've seen that every day in my volunteer work, and then now working at the council and with my sister CEOs and with all of our work colleagues, and bringing her in and saying, like, welcome, come on in. Like, we're all here. We're a bunch of women. We're a bunch of moms figuring it all out. No one here is different, right? It's a level playing field in Girl Scouts, and it goes back to that. It's just there's no differences. You're women and you're girls, and you come in and we get to share. And it was just evident of how much that was really meaningful to her, and the bonding just happened. And of course, as our kids' friendships blossomed, ours just continued to grow. And I just trusted her, and I'm a gut person, and when you have my trust, you have 1,000% of it. And then it was, all right, here's your troop. Stay a little longer on Saturday. Here's your troop, and then here's you're going camping. And I'll be over in the other section, and you'll be over there. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And she gave me that look of like, what are you doing? How do you even think that I could do this? I'm like, I'm sure you could do this. You could totally do this. And then we spent a lot of time together with our families, and just building that, and realizing that so much of us, our backgrounds are different, and so much of our lives were different. But for just as many things that were different, there was a lot that's the same. And those are the instances, and that's in Nikita and how you tell your stories. It's finding that common ground in the humanity, and realizing that we're all like, there's just a big pile of shoes, and we're all going to walk in them at some point. And sometimes they don't fit, and they're uncomfortable, and then you trade them off with somebody else. But like, we're all in this together, and when women support each other, great things can happen. And it was that community that was built. So when I started working at Girl Scouts, and knowing that there was a position open, and Giselle was, and her energy and her ambition and her personality, I was like, this is a perfect fit. And it wasn't even in my department at that time. I was VP of product, and this was in membership, and I was just like, talking to the membership people, I'm like, you got to bring her in. Like, this is the person who can go out and tell the Girl Scout story. She's amazing. And sure enough, she did. She came in and blew the roof off the place. So, but that trust is something that is really important. In this story, the vulnerabilities that we both shared with each other, and the transparency that we've had with each other of when things are rough and when things aren't, and the heart-to-heart conversations when I was moving into a higher position of power within the organization, and keeping that relationship very real, and understanding that, at any point, and I kept telling her, at any point, you can stop. Like, you do not need to put yourself out there. You do not need to you don't need to wear that brave, courageous coat all the time. And at any point, you tell me, and the plug is pulled, and you don't have to be the one to go out and talk about this and to expose yourself. And we had an understanding with that the whole way, and trusted each other through this entire process.
Thank you. So I just want to remind everyone who's watching that we're going to go and do a brief Q&A in just a few minutes. So if you have questions, if you could submit them, and I will try to ask, though we'll probably only get 2 of them. So I just have 2 more quick questions before we go to Q&A. The first one is for you, Nikita. So we know that on top of the already existing epidemic of homelessness in this country, we're going to see even more as a result of the COVID shutdowns, particularly amongst Black Americans. The data I saw is now 1 out of 4 Black Americans have missed at least one rent or mortgage payment, and also clearly because of lack of wealth, there's no money to pull yourself up. So I wonder if, we know that this is homelessness is such a traumatizing experience for families, and especially those with children, and a lot of people are going to be experiencing this. Why are troops programs like Troop 6000 so important, and why are they going to be particularly important now?
Well, we're going to see more people become homeless. I just read a headline yesterday. There's a guy living in a car, and he delivered his baby, and I was just like, and they're homeless. And yeah, in New York City, there's a right to shelter, but in many other places, it's not. And so you are going to see more families, unfortunately, living in cars and joining encampments. So, I'm obviously a journalist. I'm not an advocate. I advocate with my journalism, but I would ask people who are watching to, when you read that story about a shelter coming to your neighborhood or an affordable housing building that you think might make the neighborhood look bad, you need to remember that there are girls and their brothers, and they could be Girl Scouts. You see them at your door, and you wouldn't think twice about them being homeless, but they could be. Um, and what's so important about the troop, and for similar troops to spread to other councils, is that what I saw most for the girls is that they were exposed to not only having some joy and feeling a part of a community and being able to give back, they also were exposed to all of these different things that they can do. One of the things about Girl Scouts, and I swear I'm not like Girl Scout cheerleader, but I know a lot now after writing this book. And the great thing about Girl Scouts is that there is a badge for everything. So you know how you'll have a kid and you're like, oh, my kid is interested in dance, or my kid is interested in track, or my kid likes fashion, or my kid really doesn't like the outdoors. Well, don't worry, because Troop 6000, like I said, Troop 6000, the Girl Scouts, they have a badge for everything. And so the girls are just exposed to a lot of different things, and so you never know what is going to pique their curiosity, or just make them realize that, hey, that's what I can do when I grow up. And there is a world outside this shelter. There is, I can see some stability, even though my family is moving around. There's nothing like having that weekly meeting for a girl that she knows someone is going to show up, and not because it was school and they were obligated, but because they just thought you might like Girl Scouts. And that's really special. And so I hope a lot of different councils around the country adopt similar programs. Call Giselle and Meridith.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the last question of you, Giselle, and then I'm going to go to the Q&A. Clearly, Troop 6000 or any Girl Scout troop is not going to solve homelessness. And hopefully one day we'll have a society that determines that allowing people to be without shelter is no longer acceptable. And we won't even need Girl Scout troops that serve homeless shelters. But until then, with so many Americans struggling right now, so many Americans just really not sure how they're going to make ends meet, not able to do the things for their children that they would want to do. What message of inspiration or hope do you hope that people will get from the story of Troop 6000 and your own personal story as well?
Going back to what I said before, one of the main message that I want people to get is just keeping hope, staying faithful and optimistic that things will pass, and there are better times ahead. And then another thing, I hope that I wake something up in people. That's, like we had said before, doing the right thing. So if you know that there is someone in need, maybe you're in a better position and you can help that person or support that person, do that. Make a difference, leave your mark on the world. We are no different than anyone else, those who are living in a shelter system, compared to those who are not. So just making sure that people are, if you have resources that you can offer to other people, do so. And if you need help and you are in need, don't be afraid to speak up and speak out and say, I need help. I do need some assistance. And also knowing who your city electeds are, your city officials. There are so many resources that I don't think people are aware are available, unless they are, looking for it or asking for it. And that's something that I learned by, being in a rough situation. And, thank God Meredith was like, help me grow this relationship with Jimmy, who was my city elected, and having that confidence to know, like, if I'm in an issue, I can reach out to him and see what he can do. And it does come in handy. It's helpful. So hopefully educating others too, to make sure that they know who represents them, and that there are resources out there. Go look for it. And if you know someone that doesn't want to look for it, then help look for it for them and let them know, like, here, this is the information I brought back to you. Let me know if I can help you any further.
Thank you. Okay, so this question, I guess, is for Nikita. Is this book more geared towards adults or girls? Wondering if we could consider it for a book club choice for girls or troop leaders.
This question comes up a lot. It's certainly not YA, but it is a book that is accessible. I talk plainly and I write plainly. I think that as far as the reading is concerned, I think that even late middle schoolers, starting with 8th grade, would, get a lot out of the book, and would be able to read it. When we had this question in a previous talk, Giselle was saying, if you go any younger, make sure that you're there to answer questions of the girls that they might have about just things that are in the book that, some places it's G, other places it's PG. Some of it is PG-13. None of it is rated R. So think of it that way. But I would be honored if you chose it as a book for your troops. And you can certainly reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk to the girls.
Okay, so this question is probably for Meredith and Giselle, or Giselle. How does the troop and the council deal with the fluidity of the troop membership? Do girls come back to the meetings even when they have found housing?
You want to take that? You want me to take that?
We can tag team it. So that was absolutely one of the key factors, was knowing that there was fluidity and transient nature that could happen because of the system. And here in New York, being moved from shelter to shelter and location to location, the key important thing was the one thing that could be consistent. Your school may change, your community may change, Girl Scouting will stay the same. That will be the absolute anchor in a young woman's life as she's going through all of this. So making sure that the program itself was consistent from shelter to shelter and program delivery, that the events that we were bringing all the girls together provided that consistency and community. And then, of course, what happens when a girl and a family move to their permanent home was a very, very important factor, because we still want to invest in your leadership and your future. Like, socioeconomic status and your zip code doesn't define what your potential as a leader and female leadership looks like. So the transition program was then developed to make sure that as girls left the shelter, they continued on. Giselle, you want to talk a little bit about the look of the transition program now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a transition coordinator, and what her job is to keep in contact and keep track of girls who are moving out of shelter. So we've developed a system with some shelter providers. When girls are coming in, case managers will normally give the girls, hey, we have a Girl Scouting program here. Here's membership forms for you to fill out, and here's also a keep in touch form, so that when girls are moving out, that keep in touch form is passed over to the leaders, and they're letting us know, hey, so and so has moved out and they're not in a shelter anymore. Then our transition coordinator's job is to reach out to the family, congratulate them on their new home. We put together a gift basket that has cleaning supplies, things they can use for home, decorations for the girls' room, and some key essentials that you'll need when you first move into your new home. And then after that, what we do is work with other troop leaders that are in traditional troops or troops that don't meet in shelters, and we reach out to see if there's any room or availability in their troop for our new girl. And so once we are able to do that, we're connecting the girl with this new troop, and we're letting them, the families know and the girls know that Troop 6000 will continue to support you for 2 years after you've moved out of the shelter, so that you don't have to worry about the cost of going on trips or uniforms or badges. We'll take care of that for you while you're getting yourself situated. And once that's over, you can let us know. We do have some cases where girls may need a little extra assistance after those 2 years, and we're here for that. But of course, that's when we're also going out and asking for the funding and speaking to donors. We need to make sure that this is something that we're able to offer the girls regardless. And Girl Scouting and Girl Scouts of Greater New York has another program that does support girls who come from low-income communities, so they're able to join those programs if needed, and we're able to connect them with that as well.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you. Someone wants to know, is Troop 6000 one large troop or many troops?
It's many troops, many troops.
It's many troops, many locations. However, the identity and the sense of belonging comes from the one troop number. Because of the transient nature that can happen in the shelters, we didn't want to have a girl have a different identity again as she's being in a new community or being in a new place, in a new school. All of her own personal identity changes, but one thing remains consistent. She's part of Troop 6000, so wherever she can go, she'll have that consistency. What's interesting is in the transition program is that we have girls who, after transitioning out and joining other troops, wear both troop numbers on their uniforms, Troop 6000 and their new troop numbers, because there's such a pride in that identity of belonging and the sense of sisterhood that they first found Girl Scouting in with Troop 6000.
And how does the troop experience continuity and leadership? Do leaders change frequently?
So we've been pretty good with our leaders. I mean, I will be honest, it's not easy being a Troop 6000 volunteer. Not only are you committing your time, you're committing your emotions as well. And some people are really vulnerable to the situations that they're being placed in. And so we've had leaders that have come in and said, you know what, it was too much for me, I can't, but I'm here to support in any other way that I can. And we appreciate that honesty, because we do need leaders who are going to be able to, who understand what they're going to be taking on, and who are able to mentally, emotionally, and physically be a part of this and be that support for our girls. So our leaders have been really consistent over the last 3 years. I mean, we have over 51 leaders, out of our 51 leaders, I want to say 20 to 30 of them are still holding on from year one. And others are new because they've just heard about the program, or we've expanded and we did another search and they're just coming on. But for the most part, our retention for our leaders is pretty strong. And the few that do drop off, still keep in contact, try to find ways that they can support in different areas.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question, and it's for Meridith. Meridith, you must be so proud of this work and this troop. What is your advice for people who want to support this work?
Thank you for asking that question. There are a number of ways that you can support. One, on the very, very simplest level, keep your entire mind open and aware that anyone can be in the situation at any time, and keep empathy the first and foremost, especially as we're going into this next year or so. Here in New York, when we talk about volunteers, we always need more volunteers. There are always girls that can be served. And you can visit our website, girlscoutsnyc.org, and learn more about how to volunteer either with Troop 6000 or other programs that go into other communities. And of course, financial, all of this we provide this for the girls, right? So any contribution, no matter how small, helps, whether it's to buy a patch or a badge for a girl who's earned it and deserves to have that, or whether it's sponsoring a girl or a troop for a year or for 2 years or 3 years. So you can also go to our website, girlscoutsnyc.org, and donate to support this effort as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's the end of my part of this. So thank you, Nikita, Meredith, and Giselle. It was a great conversation, and just thank you so much for sharing your story and for writing the story, Nikita, with the world. It's an amazing, it's amazing what you did, and it's very inspiring. So thank you, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. And thank you everyone for inviting the Girl Scout Network into your homes. We will be hosting a wide variety of campfire chats, so be sure to stay up to date with our offerings on girlscouts.org/campfire chats. In the meantime, you can support Girl Scouts by becoming an adult member for $25, which helps fund our work building the next generation of female leaders. Your generosity will also support the 1.7 million Girl Scouts depending on our programming. The link has been posted in the chat log and will also be included in the follow-up to today's event. Girl Scouts also proudly supports girls who are experiencing homelessness in communities across the country and is committed to helping them learn new skills, gain confidence, enjoy outdoor adventures, and so much more. While Troop 6000 is not necessarily the first Girl Scout troop made out of girls in shelters, it epitomizes the power of Girl Scouts to prepare all girls for a lifetime of leadership. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back at our next event.